Chapter 11. I believe a leaf of grass is no less than the journey work of the stars. Walt Whitman. Eudora Weltley did not come home. Honey would not be comforted, and finally fell asleep in her father's lap in a rocking chair on the front porch. Hal sat on the porch swing and listened to the chain creak as he rocked himself back and forth. An afternoon breeze tugged at the corners of the porch, and thunder grumbled in the distance. "Thunder makes me think of your mamma," his father said. "Seems like every time it rained, she had sheets hanging on the line." "I remember," said House. "You do?" His father shifted Honey in his lap. "We pulled the sheets off the line in the rain," said House. We laughed. "We sure did," said his father. "Those were the days," he sighed. "How was pageant practice?" "Terrible. The whole team's signed up by their mamas, and the game is on the same day. Clebo thinks I'm supposed to fix it, but I can't, and Frances, she's worse than ever." His father nodded, as if he were processing all the information carefully. "Can nothing be done about the date?" Hal shook his head no. "It would be a shame not to play your game," said his father. Hal scratched his cheek. "I don't know what to do about it." His father watched the dark clouds move in. "Your mama loved baseball," he said. "Do you still have that glove she gave you just before she died?" "Yes, sir." "I thought Honey might use it one day, but she seems to have other ambitions," said his father. Thunder crackled its way across the gray sky, and House looked over at the empty clothesline. "Is there going to be a funeral for Mr. Norwood?" "I don't believe he wanted one," said his father. "That's what Pip told me today when I was in town." "Oh. It seems strange to die and not have anyone mark the occasion, doesn't it?" said his father. "Yes, sir." House had marked the occasion. He had been there. The wind rattled the pecans in the trees. The hidden sun cast the yard in a rosy-edged silver glow. "You did well this past year, son," said his father. "Yes, sir." "I know you didn't want to do it." "No, sir." He had gotten used to it, though. He had gotten good at sitting by the bedside of a quiet old man. "It wasn't bad once I got used to it." "I know," said his father. "I could tell." Leonard Jackson stood up, with the sleeping Honey in his arms. "We're going to get a soaker," he said. "Why don't you lie down for a while, too? You were up half the night." "We got practice this afternoon," said House. "Not in a thunderstorm," said his father. "Maybe it'll pass," said House. "Maybe," said his father. "Is Frances related to Mr. Norwood, Boyd?" "Can't say as she is." The sky darkened, and lightning flashed in the distance, followed by another low rumble. "Eudora's at Mr. Norwood's house for sure," said House, "and she's afraid of storms." "We'll go get her if she doesn't come back," said his father. "She'll be all right. Are you staying home?" House scratched a mosquito bite on his elbow. "Can't mow in the rain," said his father. "I'll tinker in the shed. I've got sandwiches in the kitchen if you want 'em." Rain dotted the dirt by the pecan trees, setting off dusty, sleepy smell. House stopped in his bedroom to get the shoebox of baseball cards he had found on the front porch after his elbow had been set in a cast for the second time, after it had been determined that the break was worse than they had thought. No one knew where the box had come from. House had asked his father, Clebo, the boys, but none of them knew. He and Clebo had spent hours on rainy days poring over the well-loved beat-up cards. They memorized statistics, pretended to be one player and then the next. But it was Sandy Koufax, a lefty, like House, who had captured House's imagination. House had even gone to the Bay Springs Library to look up more about Sandy Koufax. Miss Dina DeRose, the librarian, had found articles from Old Life magazines to share with House. House knew all about Koufax. He felt close to him. Now, while the thunder grumbled to coming rain and the breeze cooled the afternoon, House sat on his sleeping porch bed and pulled out cards at random. Several Willie Mays, a slew of Mickey Mantle, 3 Roger Maris, and on it went. Jackie Robinson, Don Drysdale, Roberto Clemente, Whitey Ford, giants of baseball from years past. He pulled out a Koufax card and stared at the serious face. Then he turned the card over and reread the statistics he had memorized. Sandy Koufax had pitched that perfect game in 1965. A perfect game. No runs, no hits, no errors. Each hitter came up to the plate, swung, and struck out, one after another, until the game was won. Sandy had pitched for career no-hitters. He led the National League in shutouts 3 times, in strikeouts 4 times, in wins 3 times. He made 6 All-Star appearances, won the National League Most Valuable Player Award in 1963, was World Series MVP twice, once in 1963, and again in that golden year of 1965's perfect game. House stretched out on the bed and closed his eyes as he listened to the katydids call from the pines. Their insect summer song melted into a dream and became the song-like voice of Vin Scully, announcing from the Dodger Stadium press box, "On the mound tonight for the Los Angeles Dodgers, number 32, the great left-hander, Sandy Koufax." And there he was, House, shaking hands with his hero, Koufax. Koufax smiled at House and handed him the baseball. Then he walked to the bench, disappearing with each step. Now House stood on the pitcher's mound, alone. He looked up. The stadium was a 3-tiered wonder packed with screaming fans. The crowd chanted his name. He could smell the hot dogs, the mustard, the peanuts, the sweat. He tapped the rubber on the mound with the tip of his cleat. He shook out his left arm, his pitching arm. It felt just fine. He clutched the ball in his left hand, gripped the stitches with his fingertips, and looked intently into the glove on his right hand. He could see every crease in that glove, like a detailed road map of every game he'd ever played. The roar of the crowd faded, and he found himself sitting on the front porch, now back home in Mabel, Mississippi. He was 6 years old, and he had a brand new glove. He rubbed it with neat's foot oil, massaging it with both hands, down each finger, the oil smelling like promise, all over his glove. He worked an old baseball into the pocket, turning it around and around, coating it with the oil as well. He could see every stitch in the baseball, every nick. He also saw a name scratched into it, Elizabeth, his mother's name. She called to him. He tried to string around the glove with the ball in it so it would develop a deep pocket, making it easier to catch the ball. Then he floated the way bodies do into a dream, off to find his mother. He smelled the applesauce cake in the kitchen, and he heard his mother singing to herself, singing the song she had sung to House when he was little, the symphony song. "After the dazzle of day is gone," she sang. His mother was high in the sky, in the same cirrus clouds he had seen over Norwood Boyd's house that morning. He joined her, light as a feather and free from worry. She kissed him right in the middle of his forehead, smiled, and looked deeply into his eyes. He saw her perfectly, for that was the blessing of dreams. He could remember every detail now. The comfort was enormous. House began to cry. His mother said, "You'll be fine now, House. Remember to listen for the symphony true." The symphony! House sprang up from his dream. "I have to tell you," he began, but his mother dissolved, faded into the cloud, became a hazy memory again. The sky disappeared. House was falling back to earth and darkness.